Somebody once said, the past is a different country. And that's so true, isn't it? We look to the past, we can learn the lessons of the past, we can be sometimes really encouraged by past victories and all the stories of what God has done in the past, but we can't live there either. And it's easy to keep going back to past things that worked once. But I think God often wants us to move forward. And in Hebrews chapter 12, it says, forgetting what is behind and straining towards what is ahead, I press on towards the goal to which God has called me in Christ Jesus. That eternal prize, we press on forward. It doesn't mean we don't recognize the things that happen. We don't recognize the testimonies that God's brought in our lives, the things which have been amazing. But we can't live in it either. And sometimes I have to remind myself not to live in past things that once worked well. Sometimes, you've got to move on and move forward and live in the situation you're in now and look forward also. And sometimes doors closed from the past as well. Sometimes opportunities seem to dry up for us. And that's pointing us forward and ahead to look for what's new. Now, I was thinking about when things get lost and found. And one of our main problems when we're trying to search for something we've lost is we're normally looking in the wrong places for quite a while, aren't we? We search, and where did I put my keys? Were they in that pocket, or did I leave it in that bag? Or perhaps perhaps I've left them upstairs somewhere. I don't know. Or my phone, or whatever it is. And our frequent mistake, of course, is we are looking in the wrong places to find them. And it's often a surprise when we do find them, because we think, oh, right, I didn't realise I'd put it in the bathroom, So I think God's often trying to prompt us to and help us to look in the right place for what he's doing. God's often trying to help us look in the right place for where something valuable is. And we can miss it very often, can't we? Sometimes there's a time when God actually speaks to us and shows us and says, look, I've got this new thing for you. Now, I'm just trying to help you understand it. I'm helping you to realize that I've got a new opportunity for you. And you think, okay, that's fine. And then we kind of forget it and move on and we go back to what we were doing before, but it's not quite the same. It just doesn't resonate in the same way. It just doesn't seem to work anymore. And that's because God's been saying, I've got a new thing for you. I've got change that's happening. Now, we might be going back to past things that are very negative and destructive and bad, and of course we don't want to do that. But it might be something that's quite reasonable. Before it was okay. It wasn't necessarily a bad thing. It just isn't the place where God's leading us to now. And I think that's quite a subtle thing to learn, but it's an important one. God is always moving us forward and always wanting to us to trust him. And one of the things that it shows us in the Bible is the Israelites, God's ancient people, were being led through the desert. They were going from Egypt and they're being led towards the promised land that God was going to give them. And he led them by a pillar of cloud by day and fire by night. And what happened is when God wanted them to move forward, this pillar of cloud or fire would move forward. And sometimes they would stop somewhere for quite a while, and other times maybe for a couple of nights, and maybe for a few months or whatever. It would vary from time to time. And that's something about being led by God in his timing, and he had a reason for each stop. And there can be places that God settles us for a long time. We put roots down, we take our time, we get very established, and for some people that's very much the pattern of their life, and that's fine too. Some people are very settled in one place for a long time or much of their life, but it can also be the case that perhaps at one point God says, I want you to uproot from here and move forward to somewhere else. I want you to do a new thing. You might be living in the same place, but I want you to try something different. Even if you're in the same role in life, you might be in your job or in some kind of Christian ministry or whatever, and God's saying, I want you to try something new. Don't get stuck in what you were doing. I've got fresh ideas. And so those can mean that you're changing where you are, and it can mean changing what you do. But always be open to hear God's voice saying, it's time for change. Don't get stuck. Frequently, one of our main problems is we get stuck in what we felt comfortable with, what felt safe, what felt familiar to us. And sometimes when we keep going back to that, actually it just doesn't have the same ring to it anymore. And it's clear that God's moved us forward and moved us on. And it's very important to grasp that for us as a Christian, and to understand God's good and perfect plans for us are always moving forward, because they depend on us listening and hearing his voice and being obedient to his voice and being sensitive to his voice. So don't put God in a box and say he only does things this way and it's always happened for me this way and this is the way it's always been done. There's always a danger to that it might be that God uses the same way of doing things, but it might be that he does something different. And we should always be open to that and be willing to listen to his voice and allow him to keep moving us forward step by step in the way that he's choosing for us, allowing him to open the doors of opportunity. So my prayer today is for us that we would find those doors of opportunity, that even the valley of despair, of trouble, of disaster, even when it feels like things have dried up for us, even if it feels like doors have closed on us, that those things wouldn't stop us moving forward. But actually, we see that they're great opportunities for new things to happen, new avenues of promise. And I just pray that for us, new avenues of promise to come into our life, new opportunities, new doors to open, and exciting new things to come about, because we're willing to look forward and allow God to lead us in the next step. And that's exciting. It's very exciting. So I pray that you too will share that excitement with me.